Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Capable to Promise and Production Scheduling, in brackets a provocative view. My name is Martin and I'm the host for today's webinar. I'm CEO and one of the owners of NETRONIC Software. And here in our company, I'm responsible for strategy, innovation, go-to-market, and especially owning the business with our extensions for Business Central and the add-ins for Dynamics Nav. So for the like with every webinar, you guys are on mute today. But if you have a question, feel free to use the GoToWebinar chat pane to ask this question. When I'm on PowerPoint, I will answer this question most likely right away. When I'm doing demos, typically I wait with answering questions to come back to PowerPoint slides, and then I answer the question. So in this case, I kindly ask you to be a bit patient, but nevertheless, the more questions you ask, the better I feel, because then I know that I'm talking about something that engages you guys, and this is why we are here. It should be a conversation, although it is a webinar. So besides this housekeeping kind of thing, if you have any question or if you have an idea on how we or our products can become better, then please let me know. I'm sharing here my email address and I'm sharing my LinkedIn profile. So which way you want to reach out to me, I'm fine with both. So select one that is better for you. Drop me an email, connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a message there. And I will I make pretty sure that your question, your comment, your concern, your recommendation get heard, and that you get substantiated feedback on this. Last but not least, with housekeeping details, I'm quite proud to host a podcast on Business Central and manufacturing, which is called the Business Central Manufacturing Show. And I'm pretty sure that you have something to say and something to share about Business Central manufacturing, because you are attending a webinar that is about Business Central and manufacturing. So if you would like to share with me your thoughts on Business Central and manufacturing, reach out to me, and then you're cordially invited to be my next podcast guest. And with this, let's talk about Capable to Promise and production scheduling. And this webinar is going to be most likely the most trickiest one that I ever did. Because I may come up with some conclusions and some ideas that might sound weird to some of you guys who are very familiar with Business Central manufacturing. Nevertheless, I modeled some real customer cases, and when I was playing with data, when I was making my mind, when I was building some scenarios, I actually had this idea that I share with you today. And when I first talked about this idea also internally with colleagues, they found this weird. They found it a bit provocative. And I said, oh, we should be cautious with this. So I nevertheless decided to share these thoughts with you guys. Maybe this can help all of us who are interested in Business Central manufacturing to start a bigger discussion how different tools and features that we have in Business Central should work together and should be complemented by which type of app. So there were a lot of fluffy words. Let's start to make this a little bit more concrete. And when we look at Business Central out of the box, then in manufacturing, there are two functions where I say they could be truly great, in brackets, if they were implemented in a bit different way. And both of these functions, although they could be great, they have some clear weaknesses. They have some issues with them, and hence many experts actually recommend not to use them, because these two great functions have weaknesses, or these two potentially great functions have weaknesses. And the functions that I'm talking about are capable to promise and capacity constrained resources. And if you're familiar with them, then please stay in this webinar for the next 30 to 45 minutes, because I will share some thoughts how you can actually combine them, plus combine another tool to actually find a very good answer or a potentially good answer for make-to-order customers. And if you're new to Business Central and if you're not aware of capable to promise and capacity constrained resources, then stay here, because I will really explain them from scratch so that you know what these functions do. I actually, although these functions have some weaknesses, I also acknowledge that they have some advantages. And I increasingly consider using them if there is the right glue, I call it, is put in between. So I would never use them as they are, but I would use them if there is glue put in between. And I will talk about what glue this is, but using those functions in combinations might be found weird by actually a lot of experts that are out there in the Business Central and manufacturing space. And so with this thought that I had about how to combine capable to promise and capacity constrained resources is really relevant for make-to-order manufacturers. So if you're 100% make-to-stock, then feel free to stay here and just curious listen what is relevant for your make-to-order colleagues. And if you are a partner and you have make-to-order manufacturing customers, then this is definitively, or this could be definitively relevant to you to discuss some potential new use cases and potential new solutions and ideas with your customers. And if we very simplify the make-to-order manufacturing, then we have a customer, and this customer has a very, very concrete specification of the demand that they have. And typically, this specification is very unique. Then they give this typically as a sales order to a manufacturer who turns this sales order into a production order, and then they produce a customized product that typically is very bespoke for that customer, and then the customer receives the delivery of this product that was purposely made for her or for him. And this is very much simplified, but this is the type of customer for which I think that the idea that I have could actually work and could actually work quite well. So if we make this a little bit more specific, in my point of view, a make-to-order manufacturer is characterized by a high mix, low volume. So typically they have a high variety of products, a high variety of deliverables that they manufacture. And whenever they get an order, there is only low volume, right? So they sometimes they have batch size 1, then this is this one unique piece that they build for their customers. But a lot of the make-to-order manufacturers I deal with, that they have batch sizes, I would say between 50 and 100. So they build prototypes or small series of very specified and very specific products that they ship to their customers. And each or most of the time the deliveries are unique, and this not really in not really rare cases leads to the effect that for a new customer order, the manufacturers have to create a unique BOM and a unique routing and really set up the production for that sales order, for that production order in their system. And typically, if you are in this market, then the only constant that you have is change, because specifications change, routing change, material requirements change, required skills change. So there's a lot of change. So typically, you not only have to kind of handle the high amount of orders, the high amount, the high variety in your production, but there's also high volatility in your processes and in the processes of these customers. And resulting on this, typically for these type of customers to run their business, keeping delivery times is more important than resource utilization. So if you ask a make-to-order manufacturing customer what they value more, and if they would have the choice between an optimal use of their resource utilization or 100% delivery in time, they would always vote for the on-time delivery. And for these customers, so as delivery times are that important, it is so super important to give their customers reliable delivery time commitment. So if the customer comes with a specification and places the order, they typically want to know, when do I get this? Because in most of the cases, the parts that are ordered from the customers become part of a larger value chain. So not seldomly, those make-to-order manufacturers, they actually produce for other manufacturing companies. So they produce for project manufacturers, or they produce for larger manufacturers who order bespoke and specific parts from them. And so for the customer, getting the information, not only that the MTO can serve this and can deliver this and can produce this, but also the information when they will get it is really crucial. So delivery time commitments, I would say, are almost as important as keeping them, right? And so now, if there are so many moving parts, and if there are so many changes, if the volatility is that high, how can make-to-order manufacturers give really reliable delivery dates? So when the customer comes and say, hey, I want to place an order, what should you do? What should the manufacturer say? What is the reliable delivery date? And actually, there is a function in Business Central that is made exactly for this purpose, right? So there is, on the sales order, you even don't need to have a production order. On the sales order, so exactly this business case, the customer comes, has a specification, requires an item, and they want to place an order, and they ask, hey, can you give me a delivery date when you when you can ship this to me, when you can deliver it to me? And exactly for this question, we have on the sales order the capable to promise function, right? CTP. And now I just copied text from the Microsoft documentation, from the Business Central documentation. So the capable to promise function assumes a what-if scenario, which only applies to item quantities that are not in inventory or on scheduled orders. And items that are not in inventory and items that are not scheduled, this is the nature of the make-to-order manufacturer, because if you make to the order, you at maximum have sub-assemblies on stock, but you don't have the final products on stock, because you only can produce them once you have the order. And hence you also have no scheduled orders in the system to fulfill this demand. So from just this first sentence, I would say, hey, this is a spot on function for this requirement, for this use case. And then based on this scenario, that the requested item is neither on inventory nor scheduled, Business Central, and now I made this green and bold, calculates the earliest date that the item can be available if it is to be produced, then purchased or transferred. So spot onto the requirement. Business Central calculates the earliest date that the item can be available if you have to produce it. So this is exactly the function that should help getting a realistic delivery date. And you can use this function in two ways. And again, I didn't make this up. I just copy pasted documentation from Microsoft, right? So, and you have two cases. And the one case is it calculates the earliest delivery date when the customer has not requested a specific delivery date. So the customer gives me the specification and they ask me, hey, when can you deliver? So the only thing I have to do is to run this function, and then I can tell the customer. And I don't need to create a production order at all. I just need to do this on the sales order, hit the button and get the date. So this sounds Really, really cool. And now let's have a look. And I will only work with standard Business Central function, plus I will use the visual production scheduler, so our extension, but not to schedule, not to do anything, but I will just use the VPS to show you what happens if you use that function. So I'm getting a question. If we have a make to order item, production order item on the sales order, does it takes the items, prod bomb and routing to calculate the CTP, or what data does it use? Yes, it uses the items that you have defined on the BOM, and it uses the routing. So it takes into account even the lead times that you define on the item card if you make the item crucial. So if you mark the item as crucial or critical, I don't know the word, if you mark the item as critical and have lead time on the item, then it takes this into account. And if the item, again, is something that you produce, and if you have defined routing, then it takes all the lead times from the routings into account. So this is the data that is used. I hope that answered the question, and thanks for asking. So now let's look actually how this function works. And again, I used just standard Business Central, no enhancements. The only enhancement I have is I installed the VPS to just visualize the function. So next question, or just the confirmation. Yeah, just the confirmation that my answer answered the question. So now let's jump to Business Central and have a very first look. And I'm making it now super simple. So just that we see what happens. So I quickly pull up the VPS. I have a filter here because I will focus on an item that starts with number 6. So just for exploratory reasons. And when we look at my schedule, then we see it's empty. So I'm looking at an empty schedule, and I will now create and plan the first production order. So how did I set this up? So first of all, if you look at the capacity constraint resources, there is none. So I have no capacity constraint resources. So I have actually configured Business Central as everybody would configure it. And if I look at the order promising setup, then I see I have an offset time of 1 day. So the earliest day that order promising will start with the production order is today plus 1 day. So today in my demo database is 17th of January. So it will not schedule it to today, but has an offset of 1 day. So now let's go to the case that we have, leave the VPS, it shows nothing anyway, and create a sales order, right? So we have a sales order, and we have the Canon Group. Who else? They require an item. This is my item 6000, which I will use for this webinar. Small series, so they will, whatever, they will request 50 units of item 6000, and I see already it's not available, so I have to make up, right? I need to produce it or need to buy it, but I set up this item 6000 as a make to order item. So now I can go to action, plan, order promising, and I can say capable to promise. So when is the earliest shipment date that is available? So now we know we will not start producing it today. There's an offset of 1 day. And so then if I hit this button, Business Central calculates, and it gives me, okay, the earliest shipment date is the 19th of January. Then I can say I can accept this and leave the sales order. And now I can already communicate the production, the delivery date of 19th January to my customer. Business Central did not yet create a production order, but if we run planning again, then the planning worksheet suggests I need to create a new production order with a due date of the 19th of January, and it gives me the starting date. So now I can actually carry out the action messages, create the production order, and then we can look now what happened. And now if we look again at the data in the VPS, there is this one production order that Business Central scheduled to be ready on the 19th, with it's the date that I communicated to my customers based on the capable to promise function. That was pretty easy. And there's the offset of 1 day, so it scheduled it not into today. Business Central does backward scheduling, so it took the end of the 19th and scheduled it backwards. And we see, like here, there's a little bit of setup, and then the production, the whole Thursday. So this is pretty cool. So, but now I have this production order in the system, and now what happens, I have a successful business, and somebody else is requesting, like another customer, the Silangorian, is requesting the same item as well. So they ask, and they are a little bigger customer, so they ask for 100 units. And again, now, of course, we know, hey, the line where I produce this is busy, but I'm now the sales guy, and the sales guy does not know about the production schedule. So I say, okay, I have this capable to promise function. I go to order promising. I say capable to promise, and I get the 20th of January as the date that I should communicate to my customer. So I say, okay, that sounds reasonable, accept it to the customer. I run planning. Again, I get the recommendation to create a new production order. So I create a new production order from here, and then we can look in the VPS what now happened. And now this happens, right? The VPS tells me, warning, hey, you have a capacity overload, right? Your drilling machine 1 is overloaded. So when I created the sales order for these 100 units, Business Central did not take into account that something is planned on the drilling machine. So basically, as Business Central plans with infinite capacity, it started to overload my drilling machine. And as it uses the infinite capacity calculation when running the capable to promise function, with the 20th of January, it gave me an unrealistic delivery date. Let's say it like this. I was on the sales order. I asked the system, what is capable to promise? Which date can I promise to my customer? Business Center told me, you can communicate the 20th of January. I said, okay, I accept this. I created the production order accordingly. And what happens is I have an unrealistic situation on my capacity side of things. I see that is another question. Is the capable to promise calculating the date depending on the availability of the components? Yes. In my case here, I ignored the components. I'm just looking at how to schedule it based on time on the routing. But yes, as I said earlier, if on the components, you make the components as critical on the item card, and then if you have lead times there, then it takes this into account. So now let's leave this situation as it is for a moment. Or let me go back now to my PowerPoint slides, and now we see there is an issue that we have, right? The capable to promise function, as we have it in Business Central, it delivers unrealistic delivery time commitments, right? It gives you an unrealistic picture of when you can deliver, and if you are the scheduler, then you will have a lot of people pointing at time, and it will be really hard for you to meet this. And this is, by default, Business Central plans with infinite capacity. And we just did this with 2 production orders, and these 2 production orders just have 1 routing step. So this is the most simplistic case in the world, right? I have a production with 2 production orders, and they only have 1 routing step that goes to the same machine. And Business Central, with by default planning with infinite capacity, overloads the capacity, and hence, if you run CTP, it gives you unrealistic delivery time commitment. This is really tough shit if you're a make-to-order manufacturer, really. And this is why a lot of people say, okay, you can use this to check when you would be ready in terms of when your items are there, but do not use it to actually communicate the date to your customers, but then add it to the production schedule, squeeze it in, and then derive the date from there. But in general, the function is cool. And so now, if we think what Business Central also has on offer, Business Central actually has capability to plan with finite capacity, and this is called the capacity constrained resources. And again, I'm just copy text from the Business Central docu. So capacity constrained resources allow you that the system ensures that no resource is loaded above its defined capacity. This is exactly what we need, right? We don't want to have the overload. We just want to have Business Central planning to the capacity and not overloading a resource. That was my issue that I had. There is one thing here that I already want to point out. The way of how Business Central does this is not that ideal, because Business Central can split an operation into two or more parts. And what this means, this is something that we will look at again, and I will do it exactly as I did before. I will use standard Business Central and use the VPS to just show you what Business Central does. And with this, let me quickly clean up my schedule. So I'm just getting rid of the production orders to create them new, actually. So now I forgot which one I deleted. Sorry for that. So now I delete this one. Yeah, now we have an empty schedule again. I also delete the sales orders. Sorry, that is part of the webinar, is that I have to do clean ups. So that was the Selangorian sales order, no longer needed. And I will create them new in a minute again, but I tried to avoid this for some reason. I couldn't. And which one is this? I don't need this as well. So now this is pretty much cleaned up. So now what I will do is I will define the machine center that we need for this production, which is the drilling one. I set this up as a capacity constraint resources, and I say I want to load this to 100%, and I ignore the dampen up percentage here for the purpose of this demo. So let's do exactly the same case again, and let's create a sales order. Again, Canon Group asking, and I do exactly the same case. They don't give me a date. They ask for 6,000 units, item 6,050 units. I go to plan, order promising. Say, when can I deliver this? System tells me 19th of January as before. I accept this. And then I create the production order via planning. So there's the recommendation or the suggestion to get a new production order, which I do. Now it's on the schedule. We can see it. This is the same as before, so nothing changed. Let's quickly open the VPS. And same picture as before. Right? Same picture as before. One production order, backward schedules from the 19th. All good, all fine. Now, let's add the second production order, right? Selangorian calling again and say, hey, Selangorian is 20,000. I need item 6,000. And guys, I need 100 again, please. When can you deliver? So I do the same stuff again like I did before. I said capital to promise. And now it says it will be on the 23rd. So it gives me a later date. Remember, before it was the 20th of January. Now it says it's the 23rd. So something changed, right? Something changed. And this is because I set up the machine that is needed here. I set this up as a capacity constrained resource, which is out of the box standard Business Central functionality. So now I accept this again. I communicate the 23rd to my client. And I go to planning. I create the new production order. And now let's see in the VPS what happens, right? And now it becomes really interesting. We look into VPS. We got these two production orders. And what's this? They are stacked, right? I thought I planned with finite capacity, and this is mind-boggling. But if you open the histogram, the capacity utilization chart, you actually see we don't have an overload, and also you don't see these icons here, so there is no overload. So what did Business Central do? Business Central first planned this production order, right? This was the 50 units for the Canon group, and then I came with the new production order, the 100 for Selangorian. So we have this 1 day offset, and then Business Central calculated the available capacity. So I have capacity here. I have no capacity here, but I have capacity here and I have capacity here. So it recognized, okay, in order to get this workload done, we will end on the 23rd of January. It calculated it backwards, and then it made a gap. So now, actually, the resulting schedule is start with the production order for Selangorian. So set up the machine, start to run it, interrupt this, then set up the machine for the Canon group, produce the Canon group, and then continue with the Selangorian order. This is how Business Central works with finite capacity. So Business Central builds a plan, if you use capacity constrained resources, that does not overload your machine centers. So to some extent, it gives you realistic delivery dates. However, like I marked on this slide, where is it? Like I marked on this slide, the operation will be split into 2 more parts. And actually, if you look into the capacity need entries, into the capacity allocation, you will see that this is not a VPS issue. This is how your data is in Business Central. And hence, if we use the capacity constrained resources, we have another issue, right? You get realistic delivery dates. This is what you want, but the schedule is not actionable, right? You have no schedule. You have a plan, and this plan is not actionable. And this is, again, because Business Central by default splits this operation. And again, we are talking about right now the easiest, right? The easiest possible scenario of scheduling, right? There is one machine that we use, and there are 2 production orders with 1 routing line, and they are planned on the same machine, and we get something that every customer will agree, this is not actionable. Why should I start setting up the machine for this, keep it running a bit, then stop it, set up the machine for this, finish it to the end, and then this? So now assume there is a 3rd and a 4th production order, then we will use a little bit more of the capacity here, and it's going to be a nightmare of split operation, and this is not actionable at all. So this is an issue, right? And now my thought, when I played around with this a lot. So when I saw this, I had kind of an idea. And remember the last webinar that I did? I do not know if you attended, but the last webinar I spoke about the battle between planning and scheduling. And when I spoke about this and what you can do to combine planning and scheduling, I said something about tools, and that you should be clear which tool to use for which purpose. So that was the slide that I used at that point of time. Different tasks require different tools. And again, we may have different tasks now, and we can use different tools to work against this task. So this was my thought that I had. And there is one set of tools that really is good to meet the purpose, to give customers more or less realistic delivery times. And this tool is the standard Business Central capable to promise function plus standard Business Central capacity constrained resources, at least if they are set up on your most critical machine and work centers. We just saw that if we use this combination, we get more or less realistic delivery times. There are still, they are not 100% precise, I would say, but they are pretty good. There's a pretty solid algorithm behind. And if we combine and use capable to promise with capacity constrained resources switched on, then when you run this function, when you run capable to promise function, you get more realistic delivery times or delivery time commitments. However, what you then get is completely useless for execution. No customer in the world will execute the plan that is the outcome of this delivery time commitment tool. So then take another tool that helps you to build a realistic and actionable schedule, right? So just make sure for yourself which tool you want to use for which purpose. And if you really need to give delivery time commitments without creating a production order, which is very strong if you can do this, then use capable to promise with the capacity constrained resources, but don't expect your customers or don't expect your colleagues to be able to execute the plan that this tool set generates. You then need something, you need another tool that you use to build a realistic and actionable schedule. And obviously the tool that we recommend for this is our extension called VAPS, the Visual Advanced Production Schedule, because actually the Visual Advanced Production Schedule, the VPS, also schedules with finite capacity, but it does not split the operations in these little chunks. And this is the big difference. So now let me quickly go back and see how this would work. And I will use Standard Business Central again. I may use the VPS for visualization and I will use the VAPS for scheduling. So just that we can check if needed in the VPS what is happening. So let's go back to Business Central and let me quickly clean up again. So goodbye production order for Canon. Goodbye production order for Selangorian. Empty schedule again. Yep, let me get rid of the sales orders. Selangorian, no longer needed. I just want to have fresh data so that we don't get any impact by having old data. So I leave the capacity constrained resources for the time being as set up so that we just see how this now works together. So again, the same use case as before. Let me create a new sales order. Canon Group calling, asking for item 6000. So let's keep it simple. 50 units, actions plan, order promising, capable to promise, 19th of January, I accept, right? I get it on I create the production order. I create the production order. And now what I do is I run the VAPS. So I create a simulation, which is the way of how you schedule with the VAPS. You can create multiple simulations of your schedule. You can look at them. And then everything that is new in Business Central is on what we call the standby resource. And from here, we give you various tools of adding new production orders to the schedule. We will look at more in a minute, but here, just for the time being, I take this and let's say I let this start at, not at the beginning of the shift. Somebody told me, hey, we may have some maintenance on the machine in the morning, so let's start this at 10:30 here. So now I scheduled it on the drilling machine as planned. I still meet the date of the 19th, so I leave the VAPS and I publish the simulation so that I update the production order. So now we ran it full circle, right? You had the customer asking, when can you deliver this? We ran capable to promise against finite capacity. It gave me a date. Then we created the production order, and the production scheduler came and used the VAPS to create an actionable schedule. So now this was almost nonsense, right? Because we only have this one production order. So let's make this a little bit more nonsense and then make this real. So again, Selangorian calling, and now again asking for the same item, asking for 100 units, same as before. We say plan, order promising. They can say, okay, we can. You should communicate to customer the 23rd of January. I accept this. Boom, good. I create the production order, and then we do one thing before. So now we need a production order. Just look at how this looks in Business Central now, and we use the VPS for visualization purposes again. I look at it, what I have. And now here, that's more or less pretty solid, but I would say it's also not ideal. We have the small one for the Canon group, and then we have the long one for Selangorian, and Business Central let a gap here in between because it always does backward scheduling, right? It calculated that based on the available capacity, it didn't put it here into the beginning, but it said, okay, we will communicate to customer the 23rd, and then did backward scheduling. So there is a break here in between, which is also not ideal. So then this is something that the VAPS really can nicely handle. So now if I'm production scheduler, sorry, I need to create a simulation. I put all production orders that I have, I view them. And then I just can say, okay, now apply routing, and I add this to the schedule, and now it's scheduled, no gaps in between, meeting this date, machine very solidly used. And now I have both, right? I could make my customer a realistic delivery time commitment based on the combined capable to promise function and the capacity constraint resources that I set up. And then I use the VAPS to actually make an actionable schedule that I can give to my people to work upon, like do drilling machine 1 operator, do the Canon order first, and then once you're finished, immediately start with the Selangorian one, and not do a bit of this, stop it, do a bit of this, stop it, do a bit of this. Not at all. This is actionable. This is really an actionable production order and machine sequencing schedule. And this is what the VAPS does. And it can get combined now with what we have in Business Central, the capacity constrained resources and the capable to promise function. And now let's move for a very short moment in time. Let's move away from these Mickey Mouse data and let's make it a little bit more complex. So I actually have another example here. So I'm just changing my my environment. Let me just create a new simulation so that we have something that we can start off with. And we see I have 46 fractals. I, by the way, don't need all these old simulations anymore. They are rubbish, so I can delete them. So that shows you with the VAPS, we can hold as many simulations as possible. So we can run actually a lot of production scheduled simulations, compare them, and then publish what we find best. Now I created a new simulation. And if I view it, you see, I have a bit more data here. So I have basically on the left-hand side the same machine centers and work centers that we saw before, but now it's not only one production order at drilling 1, but there's a lot of production orders. So you see, this is today, the 17th of January. I have a pretty solid workload, like let's say for 1 month, almost on my drilling machines. I would say gut feel 70% utilization for the next 3 to 4 weeks on my milling and turning machines. In my one saw is, I would say, at 90% utilization for the next 4 weeks. I have a lot of idle time in my welding work center, and also assembly and quality control, quite busy used. So I actually had to source out a bit to my subcontractors to kind of cope with the demand that I have here. So that's a pretty solid schedule, right? It's not super big, but it's solid enough to make predicting delivery dates harder than in my simple one machine to production order cases. And also here, I set up all my machine centers as capacity constrained resources. So there I set them up all as capacity constrained resources with critical load of 100%. And so now let's assume the Canon group. Who else is calling, right? The Canon group is calling, and now they are asking actually for 50 units of item 5010, but they also ask for 25 units of item 5011, and like 3 things are better than 2. They also ask for item 5012, and they want to have 80 units. And so now this is typical case, right? You have a solid schedule, but you saw that there were gaps in between. And now you have this situation. A customer calls and say, I want this item, that item, and I want to have these are the quantities. And now, when can you deliver? Okay, I don't know, right? And you could look at the schedule and try to kind of put the puzzle pieces in between. But this is really tough shit. But now with capacity constrained resources set up, you can actually run the capable to promise function to get more or less valid answer to the question, hey, when can this be ready based on the current utilization of the capacity? So let's do this. I go to order promising, I run capable to promise, and now you actually notice it takes a bit. So the more data you have, the longer it takes, but it's extremely useful information that you get. And now you see for these 3 items with these 3 different quantities, I get actually different delivery date. It tells me, okay, the first item, 5010, is available on the 2nd of March. And this one is earliest date is the 3rd of March. But the item 5011 could be available and could be ready produced on the 16th of February. So given that this, in my data, it's the 17th of January, okay, quite fast. I can tell the customer, okay, you get this based on my, although I have already a tough workload in my shop, I could get this to you in less than a month. This could be acceptable for customers. So I actually now say, okay, I accept this, and then I create the production orders. And the planning worksheet suggests me 3 production orders. Business Central gives me recommended times. So I just carry out the actual messages. I get production orders. I have now new production orders. And now I have these delivery dates out to my customers. I turned the sales orders because I got the sale based on these dates I communicated. I turned the sales orders in production orders. And now the second tool comes into place. And this is make an actionable schedule, and this is the VAPS. So I need to run a new simulation. You see, the old one that I have is outdated, right? It's outdated because I added new production orders. So actually, when I have the simulation open, let me open it quickly. You actually see it says outdated because when I created this, these 3 production orders did not exist. So now I created 3 new production orders, which means the schedule that I had before is outdated to extent because now I have more to schedule. So also when I have this open, I can actually say update simulation. Then we are fetching the data that got changed in Business Central, and we add the new production orders that were created on Business Central on the standby resource. So the standby resource that you see here is the resource that collects all the production orders that have been added to Business Central but are not part of the schedule. And this is what the standby resource is for. So now I selected this 5011 one, which I need to deliver to the customer by the 16th of January, and now I have to squeeze it actually into the schedule. So I have to squeeze it here somewhere on my saw. I have to squeeze it in my milling and turning department. I have to squeeze it on assembly. I have to squeeze it on quality control. And Capable to Promise told me, hey, you can get it done by the 16th. So what I could do is here now I can run a function that we call the apply routing. Then it goes to the standard resource, which I will do now. Then if it goes on the standard resource, you see it found a free spot here on the saw. It goes immediately to welding, found a free spot here, found a free spot here, got squeezed in here. And actually, I'm done a little bit earlier. So I'm done on the 15th, whereas the customer was, whereas I communicated to the customer the 16th. So the calculated date is not that bad. And now, with the others, I don't want to add production order by production order, but I can also say schedule, add them all. We can then also automatically look for allowed machine centers, and then we efficiently now added them all to the schedule. What we can do actually then is, after we did this, we have the sales order view, where here my sales order is for the Canon group with my 3 items, and I can tell the customer, okay, actually, the 50 units of item 5010 are scheduled to be ready on, what is this? On the 1st of March, item 5011 will be ready on the 15th of February, and item 5012. Okay, this will take some time, but we will meet the deadline we communicated to you. We told you it will be available by whatever this is, the 4th of March, and it will be ready by the 2nd of March. So now the things, in my point of view, they can come into play if on the one hand, we combine the Capable to Promise function with Business Central's capacity constraint resources, but use this tool combo only to calculate realistic delivery times, and then use another tool like the VAPS, which schedules with finite capacity, use this tool to build an actionable schedule. And with this, let me say a word of caution, because both the Capable to Promise function and the capacity constraint resource function, for the reasons that I show you, they are subject of ongoing critics. A lot of people say Microsoft could have done them better. So the idea of combining Capable to Promise, capacity constraint resources, and the VAPS is, well, it's a little bit offbeat, and it's a bit provocative, because there are these two functions that have bespoke and have proven and have well-known weaknesses. And so there are a lot of reasons to be very careful when it comes to both functions. There are a lot of reasons to be careful when it comes to Capable to Promise, and there are a lot of reasons to be careful when it comes to capacity constraint resources. However, I think if you are aware of the weaknesses, and if you make your customers aware of the weaknesses, and if you know what you are doing, then to some extent you can control the risk, right? You can control the risk of using a function that is not ideal. And you definitely need to have a tool that helps you to build an actionable schedule. And this can be the VAPS, but it could be any other scheduling solution. So, but you definitely need this. Don't expect that you run capacity constraint resources and Capable to Promise and have an actionable schedule. If you're a customer, you will not able to use it. If you're a partner, if you do this for your customers, they will select another partner because you gave them a schedule that they can't execute. I was aware of these weaknesses, and nevertheless, I played with this combo of tools, the Capable to Promise and capacity constraint resource on the one hand side to get realistic delivery times, and the VAPS to get an actionable schedule. And it started to make sense to me. So I could see cases where this would work and where this would really, to a very great way, use the advantages of Capable to Promise and capacity constraint resources and then use something else like the VAPS to cover or cope with the disadvantages. So, and I found these results actually really, really encouraging when I did these tests. And so I decided to share this idea, combining capacity constraint resources, capital promise, and a tool like the VAPS for finite capacity scheduling, because I hope that some of you guys, and I know that everybody who is with me here is very clever. Most of you all are more clever than me. You know more about manufacturing. You know your customers better. You know Business Central better than me. So I hope that some of you guys start to play around with these ideas again, so that we can add and put some collective intelligence to it, and then come maybe to whatever, a combined recommendation when to use this, when not. And please, if you play with this, please give me feedback. Please give me feedback if you like this. Please give you feedback if you think this is crazy or if I'm mad. I'm happy with all feedback that I get, but I would love to see you play with it and then think about it, experience what you see, and then give me your feedback on this. I know if you talk about this with your partner, or if you are a partner and talk about this with your colleagues, some of them may say, "Are you crazy?" But I encourage you just to test this, test how this works, and then think about this, reflect this, and then if you do this, not only give feedback to your customer or to your colleagues, but also give feedback to me, because I'm really curious to see what we can do with this idea, and I'm always on the search of making best possible use of the really strong foundation that Business Central has. And with this, I'm opening up for question. I think there is already one. No, just an endorsement that it makes sense. So thank you for this. So if you have any other question, then please let me know. And if you don't have any question yet or as of now, and if the question comes afterward, if you want to give feedback or if you want to share another idea, again, here are my contact details. You were mute on this webinar, but I'm super excited about Business Central, and I'm super happy to network and to put heads together and to think and discuss. So please get in contact, and thanks again for taking an hour of your precious time with me today. I hope that was worthwhile for me. It was fun for you. It was fun for me. And with this, see you next time around with one of the next webinars that we run. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.